story of rock in America is a tale of cultural revolution, musical innovation, and societal change. From its roots in the early 20th century to its dominance of popular culture by the century's end, rock music has been a driving force in shaping American identity and influencing global trends. The seeds of rock were sown in the early 1900s with the emergence of blues and jazz. These African-American musical forms laid the foundation for the rhythmic and improvisational elements that would later define rock music. Cities like New Orleans and Chicago became hotbeds of musical innovation, nurturing the sounds that would evolve into rock. The 1940s saw the rise of rhythm and blues, R&B, a precursor to rock and roll. Artists like Louis Jordan and Big Joe Turner blended elements of jazz, blues, and boogie-woogie, creating a high-energy sound that appealed to both black and white audiences. This crossover appeal would be crucial in rock's eventual mainstream success. The birth of rock and roll is often attributed to the early 1950s. Songs like Rocket 88 Inches by Ike Turner, 1951, and Rock Around the Clock by Bill Haley and His Comets, 1954, are considered some of the earliest rock and roll hits. These tracks combined elements of R&B with country music, creating a new and exciting sound. Elvis Presley burst onto the scene in the mid-1950s, becoming the first true rock and roll superstar. His charismatic performances, rebellious image, and blend of country, R&B, and pop elements helped popularize rock music among white audiences and sparked a cultural phenomenon. The late 1950s saw the rise of other influential rock pioneers. Chuck Berry's guitar riffs and witty lyrics about teenage life became a blueprint for future rock musicians. Little Richard's flamboyant style and energetic piano playing pushed the boundaries of performance and sexuality in rock music. As rock gained popularity, it faced backlash from conservative elements in society. Many parents and religious leaders viewed the music as a corrupting influence on youth. Despite, or perhaps because of, this controversy, rock continued to grow in popularity throughout the 1950s. The early 1960s brought new variations to rock music. Surf rock, exemplified by bands like the Beach Boys, captured the carefree spirit of California youth culture. Meanwhile, the folk revival movement, led by artists like Bob Dylan, brought a more socially conscious element to popular music. The British invasion of the mid-1960s, spearheaded by the Beatles, reinvigorated American rock. British bands like the Rolling Stones, The Who, and The Kinks brought fresh energy and styles to the genre, inspiring a new wave of American rock bands. Psychedelic rock emerged in the mid-1960s, reflecting the countercultural movement and experimentation with mind-altering drugs. Bands like Jefferson Airplane and the Grateful Dead in San Francisco and Jimi Hendrix in New York pushed rock into new sonic territories. The late 1960s saw rock music become increasingly politicized. Artists like Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, and Creedence Clearwater Revival wrote protest songs against the Vietnam War. The 1969 Woodstock Festival became a defining moment, showcasing rock's role in youth culture and political activism. Hard rock and early heavy metal developed in the late 1960s and early 1970s. Bands like Led Zeppelin, Black Sabbath, and Deep Purple created a heavier, more aggressive sound that would influence generations of rock musicians. The 1970s brought diverse styles to rock music. Progressive rock bands like Yes and Pink Floyd created complex, ambitious compositions. Glam rock, represented by artists like David Bowie and T-Rex, emphasized theatrical performances and androgynous fashion. Southern rock emerged as a distinct subgenre in the 1970s. Bands like Lynyrd Skynyrd and the Allman Brothers Band blended rock with country and blues influences, creating a sound that celebrated Southern American culture. Punk rock exploded onto the scene in the mid-1970s as a reaction against the perceived excesses of mainstream rock. Bands like the Ramones and Television in New York, and later Black Flag and Dead Kennedys on the West Coast, stripped rock down to its raw essentials. Disco, while not strictly a rock genre, had a significant impact on rock music in the late 1970s. Some rock bands incorporated disco elements into their sound, while others reacted against it, creating tension within the rock community. The 1980s saw the rise of hair metal or glam metal. Bands like Motley Crue, Poison, and Bon Jovi combined hard rock sounds with pop hooks and flamboyant image, dominating MTV and mainstream rock radio throughout the decade. Alternative rock began to take shape in the 1980s. College radio stations played a crucial role in promoting bands like R.E.M., The Smiths, and Sonic Youth, who offered a counterpoint to the glossy production and image-conscious approach of mainstream rock. Hip-hop emerged as a powerful force in American music during the 1980s. While distinct from rock, hip-hop's influence would be felt in rock music through collaborations, sampling, and the rise of rap rock in later years. The late 1980s and early 1990s saw the grunge movement emerge from Seattle. Bands like Nirvana, Pearl Jam, and Soundgarden combined elements of punk, heavy metal, and alternative rock, creating a sound that would dominate rock music in the early 1990s. Grunge's success led to a broader alternative rock boom in the 1990s. Bands like Green Day, the Smashing Pumpkins, and Red Hot Chili Peppers achieved mainstream success while maintaining alternative credibility. The 1990s also saw the rise of Britpop, with bands like Oasis and Blur achieving success in America. This renewed interest in British rock influenced American bands and contributed to the overall diversity of the rock scene. Pop-punk gained popularity in the late 1990s and early 2000s. Bands like Blink-182 and Green Day brought a more radio-friendly version of punk rock to mainstream audiences, influencing fashion and youth culture. Nu metal emerged in the late 1990s, blending elements of heavy metal with hip-hop, grunge, and alternative rock. Bands like Korn, Limp Bizkit, and Linkin Park achieved massive commercial success with this hybrid sound. The early 2000s saw a garage rock revival led by bands like The Strokes and the White Stripes. This movement emphasized a return to the raw, simplistic sound of early rock and roll. Emo and pop-punk continued to evolve in the 2000s, with bands like My Chemical Romance and Fall Out Boy achieving mainstream success. These genres often dealt with themes of adolescent angst and emotional vulnerability. Digital technology dramatically changed the music industry in the early 21st century. The rise of MP3s, peer-to-peer file sharing, and later, streaming services, altered how rock music was distributed and consumed. Social media platforms emerged as powerful tools for rock bands to connect with fans and promote their music. This direct artist-to-fan connection changed the dynamics of the music industry and allowed for more independent artists to gain followings. Rock music faced challenges in the mainstream during the 2010s, with pop, hip-hop, and electronic dance music dominating the charts. However, rock continued to evolve and maintain a dedicated fan base. The 2010s saw a revival of interest in classic rock, with many younger listeners discovering bands from the 1960s and 1970s through streaming platforms and renewed media interest. Indie rock continued to thrive in the 2010s, with bands like Arcade Fire and The National achieving critical acclaim and commercial success. The term indie became more associated with a sound and ethos than with independent label status. Rock music became increasingly diverse in the 21st century, with more women and people of color gaining recognition in a traditionally white, male-dominated genre. Artists like St. Vincent Alabama Shakes and Gary Clark Jr. brought fresh perspectives to rock. The late 2010s and early 2020s saw a resurgence of interest in rock among younger generations. Bands like Greta Van Fleet drew comparisons to classic rock acts, while others like the Struts and Rival Sons brought a modern twist to traditional rock sounds. Throughout its history, rock music in America has been closely tied to technological innovations. From the electric guitar to multi-track recording, from music videos to digital streaming, technology has shaped the sound and reach of rock music. Rock music's influence extended far beyond music. It impacted fashion, with each subgenre often associated with distinct styles. From the leather jackets of early rockers to the flannel shirts of grunge, rock fashion became a form of self-expression and rebellion. The relationship between rock music and film has been significant. Rock soundtracks became integral to many movies, while rockumentaries and biopics celebrated the genre's history and mythology. Rock music played a crucial role in many social movements throughout the 20th century. From the civil rights movement to anti-war protests, from environmentalism to LGBTQ+ rights, rock often provided the soundtrack to social change. The concept of the rock star became a powerful cultural archetype in America. Figures like Jim Morrison, Janis Joplin, and Kurt Cobain became iconic representations of rebellion, creativity, and the perils of fame. Rock music festivals evolved from countercultural gatherings like Woodstock to major commercial events. Festivals like Lollapalooza, Coachella, and Bonnaroo became important platforms for rock bands and helped shape music trends. Despite predictions of its demise, rock continued to evolve and adapt at the end of the 20th century and into the 21st. New subgenres emerged, while classic rock maintained its cultural relevance through classic rock radio formats and nostalgic appeal. As we reflect on rock in America in the 20th century, we see a genre that has been much more than just music. Rock has been a cultural force, a form of artistic expression, a commercial juggernaut, and a vehicle for social change. It has reflected and shaped American society, challenging norms, pushing boundaries, and giving voice to generations of youth. While the dominance of rock in popular music has waxed and waned, its impact on American culture remains indelible. From the early pioneers of rock and roll to the diverse voices of the 21st century, rock music continues to evolve, adapting to new technologies and social contexts while maintaining its core spirit of creativity, energy, and rebellion. As we move further into the 21st century, rock's legacy in America stands as a testament to the power of music to transform individuals and society.